You're listening to The Greater Loop, a podcast from the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston. In each episode, we bring to you leaders who connect Houston to the world, from business to diplomacy, innovation to impact. This is where global conversation begins. Let's get started.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the podcast, The Greater Loop, a program of the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston. My name is Marianne Maldonado. I'm the CEO of the World Affairs Council, and today our guest is Jon Meacham. Jon, as many of you know, is a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, former editor-in-chief at Newsweek, and contributing writer for the New York Times Book Review, and of course, a presidential biographer. Jon, welcome to the podcast. We're so honored and really excited to hear more about American Struggle, your new book. But you've written some extraordinary books in your life, including The Soul of America, which many of us have read. So when you sit down to write, do you start with a question you're trying to answer or a story you're trying to tell?
Those are entwined questions. And what I try to do is have a story that makes the point and answers the question. That's very handled and answer. I have three tests I try to check when I'm doing a project. One is, do I think that the story has resonance in this moment? Do I think there is a place in the scholarly conversation? So one is a popular conversation. The other, in the scholarly conversation, can I take an angle of vision that will be useful? And is there something new in terms of the documents or data evidence that I can put at the bloodstream? And if I can check all three of those boxes, I'll start typing.
Very interesting. And you've spent your career living with America's past, from Thomas Jefferson to Abraham Lincoln. If you could write about one historical figure and maybe invite them to dinner, who might that be?
So I'm not a you joke. It's Jesus. Like at dinner and figure out what was the big deal. Right? Now, whether you believe in the divinity of Jesus of Nazareth or not, he was arguably the most important figure who ever walked the earth. In terms of, he determines how we tell time. Just more has been done in that one person's name than anyone else. And so I'd like to not be the Last Supper because that ended poorly. So I'd like the penultimate supper.
And you've studied many leaders who have governed in deeply divided times. Are we in unusual times? The events of today, that Iran has now breached the walls of more than 6 countries in terms of bombing. Is this something that's unique, or is this just a part of the American pattern?
A little bit of both. This is an unusual era. There are elements that are unprecedented. In terms of the military operation that's unfolding now, it's not particularly unprecedented. So that fits in with post-World War II, the means by which we had inserted force since the Second World War. Some distinctions. Usually we at least check in at the United Nations. But even George Walter Bush in 1990 was willing to be impeached if the UN or Congress said, well, and he could liberate Kuwait. He'd be willing to do it. And so in the military side, it tends to track law. But this is an era in which the President of the United States attacks elections whose results he doesn't like, calls them corrupt, which is a new virus in the body politic. John Adams didn't do it in 1800, Andrew Jackson didn't do it in 1824, Richard Nixon didn't do it in 1960, Hugh Humphrey didn't do it in 1968, Gerald Ford didn't do it in 1976, Al Gore didn't do it in 2000, Secretary Clinton didn't do it in 2016, and Vice President Harris didn't do it in 2024, and those were very, very close elections. So President Trump's introduction of and this is the way I think of it, is a virus that you distrust results simply because you don't like them, I believe is fundamentally in conflict with the rest of the American spirit.
So we're going to talk about your book a little, The American Struggle. In it, you describe democracy as something that has to be defined again and again. What made you feel this at the moment? What made you feel to now is the time to write a book about that?
Well, we didn't have what we would think of as existential questions. That was unfolding since the Second World War. Bio questions, you could argue, of course, the civil rights movement was existential. But since, say, let's just start in 1968. From 1968 to 2015, we had a fairly stable political era. Presidencies came and went. We had, how many presidents in the 1960s? We had 1, 2, 3, 4. Between 1960 and 1998, we had President Kennedy, President Johnson, President Nixon, President Ford, President Carter. So a lot of churning in that job. And yet, you did not have data that suggested widespread fundamental distrust in these institutions. They might not like the institutions were doing. They may have wanted someone else to be the head of that institution, but people were not asking this simple and often subversive question, which is, isn't this entirely corrupt? And so what I wanted to try to do was answer a question of what have moments in which we have debated and fought over who is included in we the people. What has that looked like in the past?
And the name of the book, American Struggle, that's a powerful word, the word struggle. Why did you feel like it was the right way to describe the American story?
Because if you look like me, I'm a boringly heterosexual white Southern male, things work out for me in this country. But they don't necessarily work out for other people. Had the point of the United States is that very much as did in my perspectives. I won life's lottery by being born a citizen of the United States of America. And I think that we established an expectation in 1776 and 1787 that we would, in fact, attempt to live into the Jeffersonian principle of innate human law. We have only done so partially and imperfectly, but every generation that has lived into that sentence has been one that we look back on with some appreciation. Those that fall away from are generations whose laces we lament. And what I wanted to do was try to tell the stories of both our successes and our failures so that we will increase our odds that we'll be more successful.
Was there one person within the book that you particularly felt just jumped out at you that maybe you didn't know about?
Well, I knew of that, but I had not read it as carefully as I should. Frank Dallas, arguably the most important American of the 19th century, did not therefore know about. Things hid his faith in the country and its capacity to live up to that declaration. Is unbound. Imagine being a black man born into enslavement, escaping enslavement, and then being able to say, I know and do not despair of the republic, because she out of the Almighty, let there be light, has not yet spent his force. Ow. He saw something in us that gave us easy ourselves.
When you step back from the struggle, what genuinely gives you confidence in the American experiment?
That is an easy compass bar. It was surprised the bounders that it took 250 years for there to be an authoritarian movement. Not true the way there is. They constructed a constitution to check our appetites and our ambitions. They were funded at a theological insight, I think, at the heart of the Constitution, which is that most of what we are trying to do will be wrong. And so they tried to make it harder to do anything. I was under George Herbert, which was photographer, and he used to begin policy discussions with the question, how do we not make this worse? right? And that's a fundamentally conservative instinct. What we're experiencing now is not conservative.
And threads within your book talk about faith and leadership. What did you come away from, and what would you like us to learn about the leadership and its ties to the faith that originated with these men?
Well, the country's a moral undertaking. We're based not exclusively on geography or ethnicity. We're based on an ideal, on creed. And as the word Hebrew says, faith is substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And so for me to recognize your dignity, your equality before God and before the law requires me to make a kind of imaginative leap. And that's an act of faith. And I think the generations that have made that leap are the ones that we can learn the most.
In researching the American struggle, did you find yourself more worried about the country or more hopeful?
That's a great question. It has been dark before, right? I don't need to tell it he saw that or that, even 20 minutes ago in the 1960s. But I do believe that a blind faith in the country is misplaced. The idea that, well, we'll get through this because we always do is not keeping faith with the people who sacrificed so much along the way. And so it's an extraordinary hour, the most strenuous stress test for citizenship that we're experiencing surplusness in the 1960s.
And because most of our audience is so entwined with global affairs, we have young professionals that listen, we have students that listen. Tell us about one lesson from history that you feel is urgent and you would like to communicate to those individuals today.
Character is destiny. What matters most, as you never know what the world is going to put on a president's desk or on a generation's desk, is you need to know the basic habits of heart and mind of the first degree are entrusted in absolute power. And policy decisions come and go, philosophies come and go, headlines come and go, but character abides. And if you don't trust someone, then it's pretty good bet that they will not use that power.
Jon, it's been our pleasure to have you on the Greater Loop program today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for listening. Have a great day.